NBC host Kristen Welker absolutely loses it after J.D. Vance dismantles her on live TV. You're not going to want to miss this.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to talk to you about the immunity ruling and the implications. This is what Donald Trump said last year about wanting to target his political opponents. Take a listen.
I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family.
Senator, if former President Trump were to win, if you were to be his vice president, would you support him appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, the Bidens?
Well, first of all, Kristen, I find it interesting how much the media and the Democrats have lost their mind over this particular quote. Donald Trump is talking about appointing a special prosecutor to investigate Joe Biden for wrongdoing. Joe Biden has done exactly that for the last few years and has done far more in addition to that to engage in a campaign of lawfare against his political opposition. I think what Donald Trump is simply saying is we ought to investigate the prior administration. There are obviously many instances of wrongdoing. The House Oversight Committee has identified a number of corrupt business transactions that may or may not be criminal. Of course, you have to investigate to find out. So I think Donald Trump saying, look, let's do the basic work of investigating wrongdoing is a totally reasonable thing for him to do. And frankly, the Biden administration has done far worse. So if you think that what Donald Trump is proposing is a threat to democracy, isn't what Biden has already done a massive threat to our system of law and government?
Senator, just to be very clear, though, Joe Biden didn't appoint a special prosecutor. The Attorney General did that. Trump was indicted by grand juries. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers in New York. But can we just go back to the core question here? Would you support him taking such an action? It sounds like you're saying, yes, you would.
I would absolutely support investigating prior wrongdoing by our government. Absolutely. That's what you have to have in a system of law and order, Kristen. But I have to reject the premise here. Joe Biden appointed the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who, of course, answers to Joe Biden, can be fired by Joe Biden. So the idea that the Biden administration has nothing to do with the appointment of the special prosecutor, I think, completely betrays a misunderstanding of how our system of government actually works. And of course, Kristen, we have to make this point, Kristen, that the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York, which I think now is fundamentally been thrown in doubt by this immunity case, it was one of the main guys was a Department of Justice official in the Biden administration who jumped ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after Donald Trump.
It is completely disingenuous for her to say that Joe Biden had nothing to do with the lawfare that is used against Donald Trump. Because plain and simple, everyone knows this came from the top. This did not come from Merrick Garland. Merrick Garland was probably appointed on the fact that he would go after Donald Trump. If he refused to go after Donald Trump, I refuse to believe that he would have got that position that he's in. And also, they're afraid of Donald Trump being this tyrant going after his political opponents. He did the exact opposite when he was in the position last time he was in the White House, because he ran on the notion that he would go after Hillary Clinton, #lock her up. But then he decided against doing that for the betterment of the nation and to heal us, to bring us all together. Meanwhile, Joe Biden ran on the premise that he would bring together this nation. He did the complete opposite. He went after Donald Trump with all of his might. And they have been losing day in and day out because, plain and simple, the man did nothing wrong.
That happens all the time. People are appointed from Washington, but the DOJ told Congress, testified this week
Kristen,
that it reviewed
it happens.
Hold on, Senator.
Are you really saying, Kristen?
Senator, let me finish my sentence.
All
then
the
I'll
time
let you finish. Hold on.
The number.
Let me just finish this. The DOJ told Congress this week it reviewed all communications since Biden took office and found no contact between federal prosecutors and those involved with that case in New York. Can you stick to the substance of the question, though? Let me just ask, because I just want to stick with this line of theory that you are laying out, which is you are saying it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department. If it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department, as you say, which there's no evidence of that, why is it okay for Donald Trump to do that?
Well, Kristen, first of all, you said that it happens all the time, that the number 3 person in the Department of Justice jumps ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after the president's political opponent. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of American democracy, and I don't think that we should legitimize it. Now, if Donald Trump's attorney general had his number 2 or his number 3 jump ship to a local prosecutor's office in Ohio or Wisconsin, and that person then went after Donald Trump's political opposition, that's a different conversation.
Senator,
all he's suggesting is that we should investigate credible arguments of wrongdoing. That's all that Donald Trump is saying. That is not a threat to democracy. That's merely reinforcing our system of law and government.
Bottom line, you are okay with Donald Trump appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, which would include Joe Biden. You're just, to button that up, it sounds like you're saying yes. Let me move on, though, to my next question. I want to talk to you about the Heritage Foundation. It's a conservative think tank in Washington. It shapes the agenda they would like to see in a Trump second term. The president said this after the Supreme Court's ruling this week. Take a look.
We're in the process of taking this country back. No one in the audience should be despairing. No one should be discouraged. We ought to be really encouraged by what happened yesterday. We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Do you support those calls for a revolution, and would political violence ever be justified?
Well, of course, political violence is never justified, Kristen. You'll have to ask the president of the Heritage Foundation to defend his remarks if you'd like to do that. I will say, look, the Heritage Foundation does a lot of good work. It does a lot of things that I disagree with, a lot of things that I agree with. But the Heritage Foundation is a nonprofit organization that works on public policy, and I think it's an important part of how D.C. functions and operates. We'll continue to have important conversations in the Republican Party with a whole host of think tanks from the right and from the left as we craft public policy. That's the way the city works. And again, I'm not going to be the person who serves as the spokesperson for the Heritage Foundation. I don't have any affiliation.
Sounds like you're distancing yourself from those comments, that talk of political violence.
Look, Kristen, I certainly don't think political violence is justified. That's certainly actually not what I think that Kevin Roberts was saying to begin with. But again, have him on your program to defend what he said.
What a pompous young lady. You just pull a random quote from a Republican and say, all right, defend this. If you go through any of these channels, whether it's MSNBC, ABC, The View, any of these shows, you will hear them threaten violence against Donald Trump on a day-to-day basis. Yet many Republicans have the wherewithal to be able to separate it. Okay, that's just a crazy lady on TV. That does not represent the Democrats as a whole. Have to be able to separate that. And you can't just lump all Republicans together just because this man's calling for political violence, even though he never explicitly said that. And I can almost guarantee you they're taking him out of context.
Let me ask you specifically about Project 2025 for our viewers so that they know. It's basically a policy blueprint for a second Trump presidency. It's supported by the Heritage Foundation and other conservative groups. The Biden campaign has said Project 25, quote, should scare every single American. It would give Trump limitless power over our daily lives. Among the things they are calling for is reversing approval of the abortion pill, mifepristone. But Donald Trump says he supports access to that pill, actually. Do you support access to abortion medication as Donald Trump does?
Well, Kristen, you asked about Project 2025, and I want to be clear here that Trump explicitly has said his own transition team runs the Trump transition and will run the Trump administration. Again, you have a whole host of organizations, some of which have good ideas, some of which have bad ideas, and some of which have both. And I'm sure the Trump administration will talk to a lot of people as it's crafting an agenda to bring back American manufacturing jobs, to lower inflation, and to bring peace and prosperity back to the world. That's the whole reason why me and so many others are trying to reelect Donald Trump, is because the agenda actually worked. It was his agenda, and I think it'll work again for the American people. On the question of the abortion pill, what so many of us have said is that, look, we certainly don't. The Supreme Court made a decision saying that the American people should have access to that medication. Donald Trump has supported that opinion. I support that opinion. I think it's important to say that we actually have to have an important conversation in this country about what our abortion policy should be. Donald Trump is the pragmatic leader here. He's saying most abortion policy is going to be decided by the states. We want to make it easier and more affordable for young women and parents to have families to begin with. We want to lower housing costs, eliminate those surprise medical bills that so many families see after they have a baby. That's the Trump and Republican approach to this issue. Meanwhile, Joe Biden wants taxpayer-funded abortion up to the moment of birth. It's so crazy to me how the Democrats frame this as Republicans. Just let me finish, Kristen. They frame Democrats as being reasonable and pragmatic, when in reality, Republicans are the one trying to find some common ground here.
As you know, very few abortions take place later in pregnancy, and almost always because there is a medical emergency. I know Trump is trying to distance himself from Project 2025, but we have to point out that a number of people who are involved with it are former Trump officials, Ben Carson, Peter Navarro, Russ Vought, and others. But just to be clear, you support mifepristone being accessible.
Yes, Kristen, I do. But again, on the Project 2025 issue, what the media and the Democrats are trying to do is attach its most unpopular elements to the Trump administration. It's a 900-page document. I guarantee there are things that Trump likes and dislikes about that 900-page document, but he is the person who will determine the agenda of the next administration. All he said very explicitly is, I am in charge of the next administration because I'm the person running for president. It's just important to make that clarification.
Let me ask you something that caught our eye. This is something you wrote in the New York Times op-ed in 2017 about former President Barack Obama. You criticized his policies, but you also said, quote, "It is one of the great failures of recent political history that the Republican Party was too often unable to disconnect legitimate political disagreements from the fact that the president himself is an admirable man. For at a pivotal time in my life, Barack Obama gave me hope that a boy who grew up like me could still achieve the most important of my dreams. For that, you write, I will miss him. And the example he set," you wrote that just days before Donald Trump was inaugurated. Do you still consider Barack Obama to be an admirable man who you miss?
Well, you know, I grew up in a broken family, Kristen, and I just wanted to be a good husband and dad. And certainly Barack Obama, despite my many political disagreements with him, he's clearly a good husband and a father. By the way, I'd say the same thing about Donald Trump, whose children love him. And I think this is one of the things the media often misses about Trump, is how genuinely devoted he is to his family, to his grandchildren, and how part of his pro-life messaging, his fundamental pro-life view, is that we ought to make it easier for more American families to have those thriving children and thriving families. So certainly I think we've been blessed with a lot of good examples across our country. And yeah, absolutely. Was Barack Obama a good president? No. Was he a good husband and father? Yes.
So he's still an admirable man?
That's just what I said, Kristen. Absolutely.
All right.
Whether you like Obama or not, you have to admit he did inspire a lot of people because he's the first African-American president, and you have to give him props for that. And I will say this, he is an exceptional public speaker. He is very good at swaying an audience. It just goes to show how far these people are reaching, that they are wasting precious TV airtime. Because Vance said Obama was an admirable man like a decade ago, and that's getting airtime. That just goes to show how far these people are reaching. But I'll tell you what, I got a lot of respect for J.D. Vance because he was putting a perfect counter to everything that this lady was spewing. She was just saying the old talking points that you hear all the time on CNN. The best way to deal with all that is to just state your policy and just stick to the facts. When you start going astray and talking about these emotional issues, that's what makes you appear weak. J.D. Vance knew this and refused to take the bait. He was sticking to the truth, and it was infuriating this lady right here. I'll be the first to say, I had doubts about J.D. Vance as Trump's VP because all along I wanted Vivek. But after seeing this, I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe Trump did make the right call. He seems like the right man for the job. He's strong, level-headed, and he will not back down. What do you think? Is it a cause for concern that J.D. Vance said that Obama was an admirable man a decade ago, or no? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed, make sure to smash that like, comment, subscribe, and I wish you guys nothing but the best. Until next time.